In the vast expanse of the Milky Way, humanity had once been considered little more than an insignificant speck, an anomaly on a small, temperate world among countless other civilizations. But as the centuries passed, Earth's population expanded, its influence stretched far beyond its home planet, and its technology evolved at an exponential rate. Humanity had risen to power, joining a vast galactic community filled with dozens of alien species, some peaceful, others not so much. For most of its existence, humanity had been the underdog, surviving and thriving through sheer willpower, adaptability, and an unmatched capacity for innovation. They fought wars, suffered tragedies, and endured countless threats, both from within and beyond their borders. But nothing in history could have prepared them for what was coming. The skies darkened in an instant. It was a day that would be remembered for millennia, an ordinary day that swiftly turned into an inferno of chaos. The first sign of disaster came as a fleet of unknown ships appeared at the edges of Earth's orbit. Their ships, sleek and ominous, hovered like vultures, casting shadows on the planet below. In less than an hour, the enemy fleet, a vast coalition of alien species, had surrounded the Earth. They came with a single, unified goal: the annihilation of humanity. For decades, human diplomats had worked tirelessly to maintain peace with the Galactic Council, a coalition of advanced races that governed the stars. But somewhere along the way, something had gone wrong. The Earth had become a target, and no one could explain why. The attackers made no demand. No terms. Just an immediate and overwhelming assault. The battle began in space, as plasma cannons and energy beams tore into humanity's fragile fleet. Yet, as always, humanity had one advantage: its determination. The first strike sent shockwaves across Earth, but it didn't break the spirit of its defenders. The Earth's defenses were hastily activated, and humanity's military, though outnumbered, fought back with the fury of an entire species fighting for its survival. The air buzzed with activity as human ships launched into the heavens, engaging the enemy on every front. It was chaotic, explosive, and brutal, yet the humans held their ground. Admiral Lucas Carter, commander of Earth's last line of defense, stood at the helm of the flagship Seraphim, a symbol of humanity's indomitable will. He watched the battle unfold through the holoscreens around him. His eyes were grim, but his resolve was ironclad. He had faced numerous threats before, but nothing on this scale. "We won't go down without a fight," Carter muttered under his breath. His crew, battle-hardened and loyal, nodded in agreement. There was no fear in their hearts, only the fierce desire to protect their home. The Seraphim and its fleet fought valiantly, but the sheer number of enemy ships began to take its toll. Alien warships, superior in both size and firepower, overwhelmed humanity's defenses. The Seraphim was struck multiple times, and the once pristine ship now had scorch marks and battle scars. On the ground, chaos unfolded as well. Earth's cities, once gleaming with technological progress, were now reduced to war zones. Alien forces had landed and begun their invasion. The human military, though battle-tested, was being overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the attack. But, like in space, humanity fought on, refusing to surrender. As the enemy's ground forces stormed the streets, humans turned their cities into fortresses. What the aliens had underestimated was humanity's resourcefulness. Each man, woman, and child took up arms, fighting back with everything they had. No civilian was left unarmed. No family was untouched. Humanity's last stand was a fight not just of soldiers, but of an entire species determined to survive. Among the first to fight were the resistance groups that had long awaited the return of hostilities, organized in secret, preparing for a day like this. They had anticipated the possibility of war and had spent years training, stockpiling weapons, and establishing communication networks. As the alien forces spread through the urban landscapes, humanity's insurgents waged their guerrilla war, striking fast and disappearing into the chaos. In the midst of all the violence and confusion, one thing was clear: the invaders had underestimated humanity's capacity to endure. There was a fire in the hearts of men and women that would not be extinguished by a superior force. And as the invaders' ships loomed larger in the skies, humanity's fight for survival was just beginning. As Carter surveyed the battlefield, he knew that the odds were stacked against them. But as long as one human remained alive, they would fight. And though the sky above Earth darkened with the shadow of an impending doom, a single thought burned in the hearts of humankind: they would never surrender. The enemy's invasion was not a simple military conquest, it was an extermination. As human resistance forces fought tooth and nail in every corner of the globe, a chilling realization spread among the defenders: the invaders had no intention of negotiating. They sought the complete obliteration of humanity, erasing their species from the history of the galaxy. Humanity's response to this was not one of fear, but of defiance. Even as the skies burned with enemy fire and cities fell to alien boots, every soldier, every civilian, every leader understood one thing: Earth would not go quietly. Admiral Lucas Carter sat in the command center of the Seraphim, his face illuminated by the flickering red light of a damaged control screen. His flagship was badly damaged, hanging by a thread in space. Yet it was still operational, barely. The situation on Earth was dire, but there was something about the way humans fought that unsettled the invaders. "They're relentless," said Commander Alara Voss, one of Carter's most trusted officers. She was scanning the tactical displays, her face grim as she analyzed the enemy's movements. "Their ships are superior. They outgun us at every turn. And yet, they're being slowed down," Carter said, his eyes narrowing. "These aliens expected us to break. But instead, we're dragging them into a fight they didn't anticipate. A fight for survival." Humanity's strategies were unconventional. Unlike the alien invaders, whose tactics followed centuries of unchallenged dominance, humans were improvising, adapting, and evolving in the heat of battle. They had no grand fleet to rival the enemy's armada. But what they did have was a willpower that could not be measured by numbers or firepower. From the shattered remains of Earth cities, resistance groups had formed their own counteroffensive, launching guerrilla strikes against the alien occupation forces. Urban warfare became their battleground. Humans were expert at using their home turf to their advantage. From hidden tunnels to crumbling skyscrapers, Earth's defenders struck fast and then disappeared before the enemy could retaliate. It was a cat-and-mouse game, and humanity was playing it with a ferocity born of desperation. One of the most notable resistance groups was the Shadow Legion, a ragtag collection of survivors from all walks of life. Led by General Lena Hawke, a decorated war hero, the Legion had become a symbol of humanity's resolve. The group consisted of soldiers, former scientists, engineers, and civilians who had witnessed the initial wave of destruction. Their mission was simple: disrupt the invaders at every turn and rally the rest of humanity to fight back. In the ruins of New York City, General Hawke addressed her makeshift army in a hidden bunker beneath the city. Their faces were grim but determined. "We don't fight for a world of cities and monuments," Hawke said, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "We fight for our children. We fight for the future. We fight for the right to exist." Her words were more than a rallying cry, they were a testament to the strength that had been forged in humanity's darkest moments. The Shadow Legion had been in the heart of every major resistance operation. They had sabotaged alien supply lines, stolen technology, and even launched strikes against the invaders' command ships. Each victory, no matter how small, was a victory for the survival of humankind. But it wasn't just the resistance groups that fought. Across Earth, civilians had turned into warriors, defending their homes with whatever they could find. Fathers and mothers used tools as weapons, children helped distribute food and medical supplies, and former farmers picked up rifles to defend their neighborhoods. It was humanity's last stand, every person mattered, and each action was a step closer to pushing the invaders back. In space, Admiral Carter was determined to keep the Seraphim operational, despite its damaged systems. They had to stall the enemy long enough for humanity's forces to regroup and reinforce their homeworld. Yet, with every passing hour, the enemy's superiority grew more evident. Alien warships, led by a formidable alien species known as the Calther, encircled Earth's orbit. Their leader, General Archon, broadcasted a chilling message to the human defenders. "Surrender, Earthlings. Your extinction is inevitable. Your defiance is pointless. But Carter wasn't about to back down. The man who had once stood in the halls of diplomacy now stood as humanity's last line of defense. He knew the Calther were ruthless, but he also knew that humanity had something they couldn't replicate, an unyielding will to fight. "We'll make them regret underestimating us," Carter said, his voice cold with determination. "No surrender. No retreat." In the darkened corridors of the Seraphim, plans were being drawn up. Desperate, unconventional strategies were being crafted. And on Earth, humanity was united, every life, every action, every fight serving the same cause. The flame of resistance burned brighter with each passing day, and the invaders would soon learn that humanity's last stand was more than a battle for survival, it was a declaration that they would never be erased from the stars. As the days passed, the resistance grew bolder. Despite the overwhelming power of the alien forces, humanity's fight didn't wane, it only intensified. In every major city, in every corner of the Earth, defiance spread like wildfire. The Shadow Legion continued to be the vanguard of the resistance, launching strike after strike against the invaders. But it was becoming clear that the aliens weren't just here to destroy, they were studying their enemies, analyzing every tactic, every weakness. The Calther, with their superior technology, seemed to always be one step ahead. They were calculating, strategic, and unrelenting. Yet there was something they didn't understand about humanity, something that could never be quantified in the cold equations of war. General Lena Hawke stood in the ruins of Washington, D.C., overlooking a battlefield filled with destruction, but also hope. The resistance was planning its next major offensive, a final push to cripple the Calther's command structure. But to do that, they needed one thing, a weapon capable of piercing through the aliens' impenetrable shields. "We've got a chance," Hawke said, pacing in front of a war map projected onto a crumbling wall. "But we need the technology that can give us the upper hand." The key to their survival lay in a forgotten human creation, a weapon so advanced that even the Calther had overlooked it. Deep within an underground military facility, far from the reach of the invaders, lay humanity's ultimate weapon, the Phoenix Project. A hidden research project developed decades ago, it was designed as a last-ditch defense against any galactic threats. Yet, until now, it had remained dormant, its existence known only to a select few. Carter's fleet in orbit had barely managed to survive the alien onslaught. They were losing ships, and reinforcements were dwindling. But it was their only chance. If they could gain control of the Phoenix Project and bring its technology to bear, they might have a fighting chance. "I'll take a team and retrieve it," Hawke declared, her face set with determination. "We'll breach their defenses and get it back, no matter the cost." She assembled a team of the best operatives, including technicians, engineers, and soldiers who had survived the early days of the invasion. It was a perilous mission, one that would take them deep into the heart of enemy-controlled territory. Meanwhile, on the Seraphim, Admiral Carter was preparing for a different kind of battle. In an effort to buy time for the Phoenix Project team, he had devised a risky plan, a counteroffensive in space, targeting the Calther flagship. If the humans could take out the flagship's command center, it could throw the enemy's forces into disarray and disrupt their coordinated attack on Earth. But the odds were staggering. Carter's fleet was down to half its original strength, and the alien fleet was far superior. Even so, Carter knew they had to try. It wasn't just about defending Earth anymore, it was about striking back with everything they had. "Captain Davis," Carter said, turning to his second-in-command, "prepare the fleet. We're going to hit them where it hurts." In the midst of this chaos, a message from an unlikely source arrived. It was encrypted, but the signature was unmistakable. It was from Earth's last line of defense, the Hawking Initiative, a group of elite scientists and engineers who had been working in secret on developing humanity's most advanced weapons. Their message was simple, but profound. "The Phoenix is ready." The team Hawke had assembled began their mission at dawn. They infiltrated the outskirts of the Calther's heavily guarded perimeter, moving swiftly and silently under the cover of darkness. The team relied on everything they had learned in the months of resisting the invaders. They used the terrain to their advantage, staying off the radar, avoiding patrols, and making their way toward the research facility. Inside the facility, they found what they had been searching for, a vast chamber filled with advanced weaponry, prototypes of experimental technologies humanity had been developing for years. The centerpiece, however, was the Phoenix Core, a device that harnessed the raw power of a star's energy, capable of unleashing devastating blasts capable of disintegrating entire fleets. It was humanity's ultimate weapon, a creation born from desperation and ingenuity. As Hawk's team prepared to activate the Phoenix Core, the ground shook beneath their feet. The Calther had discovered their presence. They were closing in fast. The countdown had begun. "We've got one shot at this," Hawk said, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. "Let's make it count." With the Phoenix Core in tow, they fought their way through enemy lines, retreating to a hidden underground tunnel where their extraction ship awaited. But the Calther were relentless. Alien soldiers clashed with the Resistance fighters at every turn, their advanced weaponry cutting through humanity's defenses with ease. Yet, the Resistance fought with the fury of the desperate. Back in orbit, Admiral Carter's plan was set into motion. The Seraphim and its remaining ships launched a bold attack on the Calther flagship. It was a desperate, suicidal move, but it worked. Against all odds, the flagship's shields began to falter as the humans deployed everything they had. Carter's ship made a direct assault on the flagship's central core, taking out its primary weapons array in a massive explosion. "Now!" Carter shouted, his voice ringing through the command center as the Seraphim rocked from the impact. The disruption caused by the attack provided the perfect cover for Hawk's team to make their escape with the Phoenix Core. As they boarded their ship and fled into the skies, the battle on Earth reached its climax. Humanity had found hope where there was none, and the tide was beginning to turn. The Phoenix was rising. Humanity's fire, long thought extinguished, was burning brighter than ever before. The Phoenix Core had been retrieved, but the battle was far from over. With the Calther's forces bearing down on Earth, every second mattered. General Lena Hawk's team had barely escaped the Calther stronghold with their lives, the Phoenix Core safely in tow. As their ship sped toward the orbital station where Admiral Lucas Carter awaited, the Resistance was faced with the realization that while their weapon had the power to shift the tides of war, they still lacked the means to fully unleash its potential. The Phoenix Core wasn't just a weapon, it was a power source unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Capable of drawing energy from a star's core, it could create blasts so intense that entire fleets would be reduced to ash. But before it could be activated, humanity needed a place to deploy it, and the Calther were already making sure Earth had no place left for refuge. As Hawk's ship entered Earth's orbit, she received a message from Carter. "General, we've bought some time, but the Calther won't be fooled for long. We need to strike before they regroup." The message was clear, the moment of retaliation had arrived. Admiral Carter, though battered and bruised, had managed to survive the assault on the Calther flagship. In the aftermath of the battle, he had ordered a full retreat to the Moon's hidden military base, a facility once thought to be obsolete but now Earth's last line of defense. The Seraphim and its remaining ships were huddled there, using the Moon's craters to shield them from the alien fleet sensors. With the Phoenix Core in their possession, humanity had a fighting chance. The device was designed to be harnessed as a last-ditch effort, to give Earth's defenders one final, devastating blow. But it wasn't something that could be deployed easily. They needed to synchronize the energy it produced with the weapon systems aboard the Seraphim, and that meant working quickly, with no room for error. "We'll need to install the Phoenix Core into the reactor core of the Seraphim," explained Dr. Alana Voss, one of humanity's top engineers. "Once we do that, we can convert its power into concentrated bursts that can cripple their fleet. But it's going to take time. Time we don't have." The clock was ticking. As Hawk and her team set up the Phoenix Core in the ship's reactor, Carter rallied the remaining human forces, preparing them for the largest and most dangerous offensive they had ever attempted. In the darkness of space, the Calther fleet had regrouped, ready to finish what they had started. With the flagship's primary command systems repaired, General Archon, the Calther commander, was eager to crush Earth once and for all. He ordered his fleet to engage at maximum speed, intending to deliver the final blow before humanity had a chance to recover. But the Calther didn't anticipate one thing: they underestimated how far humanity would go to survive. Earth's defenses, once thought to be crumbling, were beginning to show signs of life. The Seraphim had not only survived, but it was preparing for one last, desperate assault. The fleet's makeshift reinforcements had turned the tide, and now, the Resistance had a weapon that could give them an edge. "We can't let them reach the surface," Carter said, his voice steady but full of resolve. "They'll break through if we don't act now. We hit them first, we hit them hard." The moment the Phoenix core was integrated into the Seraphim's reactor, the entire ship seemed to hum with new energy. The colossal power of a dying star surged through the vessel's systems, filling every crevice of the ship with an energy that was both intoxicating and terrifying. The Seraphim had become a weapon of mass destruction in its own right. From Earth's surface, the sky began to glow with the ominous light of the impending battle. Humanity's remaining fighters in orbit prepared for the largest fleet engagement the galaxy had ever witnessed. Hawk's voice crackled over the comms, "We're ready. Let's show them what humanity can do." The battle erupted as the Seraphim led the charge, its weapons primed and its engines firing with an intensity that made it seem more like a comet than a warship. The Calther fleet met them head-on, their ships massive and intimidating, but humanity's resolve was equally powerful. With every blast, the humans carved a path toward their enemy, forcing the invaders to scramble as the Seraphim unleashed its first burst from the Phoenix core. The sheer magnitude of the blast sent shockwaves through space. The first Calther ship to be hit disintegrated instantly, its remains scattering in all directions. The Phoenix core's energy crackled through the void, a dazzling force that seemed to pull the very stars toward it. The Calther, caught off guard by the unprecedented power, tried to regroup, but it was too late. The tide had shifted. Back on Earth, the streets were alive with the sounds of humanity's last stand. The Shadow Legion and Resistance forces, emboldened by the sudden shift in space, pushed forward with renewed strength. The Calther forces, though well organized and equipped, were beginning to falter. Earth's cities, still in ruins, had become an endless battleground, but the Resistance had found new hope in the stars. They knew that for the first time in months, victory was within their grasp. As Carter and Hawk watched from their respective positions, one in the vast expanse of space, the other in the war-ravaged streets of Earth, they both understood that this moment wasn't just about winning a battle. It was about humanity's ability to endure, to fight back when faced with impossible odds. This was their moment, their defiance, their rebellion against those who believed they could never be defeated. "We will not be erased," Carter said, a promise that reverberated across the battlefield. "This is humanity's fight." And as the final wave of Calther ships advanced, the fire of rebellion flared brighter than ever, ready to burn through the darkness. The battle raged on in the cold expanse of space, and the Calther fleet, once so sure of their victory, found themselves reeling from the devastating force of humanity's Phoenix core. The pulse of the weapon had left them scrambling, their once perfect coordination breaking down in the face of an enemy they could no longer predict. Admiral Carter's fleet, now bolstered by the power of the Phoenix core, pressed the attack relentlessly, every human vessel fueled by the unyielding will to survive. "Focus fire on the Calther flagship," Carter commanded, his voice sharp as the Seraphim fired another barrage of energy blasts. "We take down their command ship, and the rest will fall apart." The Calther flagship, massive and imposing, was their nerve center, a fortress bristling with weapons and shields that could withstand most known forces. But now, with the concentrated power of the Phoenix core ripping through their defenses, it was beginning to falter. The flagship's shield sparked and crackled, unable to handle the onslaught of energy. On board the Seraphim, the crew was working feverishly to keep the ship intact. The damage was extensive, sections of the hull were breached, and life support systems were running on minimal power, but they kept going. The Seraphim was more than a ship now, it was a symbol of humanity's determination, and it would not fall. As the Seraphim led the charge, Commander Alara Voss worked alongside Dr. Alana Voss to keep the Phoenix core's power in check. They had to make sure it didn't burn out before they could use it to full effect. "We're pushing it too hard, Commander," Dr. Voss warned, her hands flying over the control panels. The core wasn't meant for continuous fire. It'll collapse if we keep this up. I don't care if it collapses, Elara shot back. We don't have time for another plan. Keep it going. In the heart of the battle, the Calthor flagship continued to take the brunt of humanity's fury. Energy blasts from the Seraphim's Phoenix core sliced through the enemy ship's outer hull, sending debris spiraling into the void. But despite the damage, the Calthor flagship remained operational. Its commanders inside were preparing their last desperate measures. Inside the flagship's command deck, General Archon, the Calthor leader, watched the damage unfold with a cold, calculating expression. His fleet had suffered heavy losses, but he was not one to back down. He had one final plan to crush humanity's resistance, a superweapon, buried deep within the flagship's core, a device capable of wiping out Earth's atmosphere in one catastrophic pulse. You have underestimated us, humans, Archon said, his voice resonating through the command deck. Prepare for extinction. As Archon activated the countdown for the superweapon, he sent a signal to his forces, preparing them for the final stage of their operation. The weapon's core began to hum, building to an apocalyptic crescendo. If it succeeded, Earth would be scorched, its atmosphere shattered in an instant. But Carter knew this was coming. It had to be. The Calthor had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, to see through their strategy. From the moment the Phoenix core had turned the tide of battle, Carter had anticipated the Calthor's desperation, and he had a plan to counter it. Commander Voss, Carter's voice crackled over the comms, we need a direct link to their superweapon control systems. We can't let them fire that thing. We're on it, sir, Elara Voss responded without hesitation. Back on Earth, General Hawk and the Shadow Legion had been fighting tooth and nail to hold back the alien ground forces. The Resistance's numbers were dwindling, but they fought with unrelenting resolve. With each strike against the invaders, they bought more time for their allies in space. But Earth itself had become a battleground like no other. Skyscrapers were reduced to rubble, cities that had once been beacons of civilization were now war zones. Yet, in every corner of the globe, the Resistance refused to surrender. Hawk, though exhausted from months of fighting, led her forces with the same fiery determination she had shown from the start. This is it, people, Hawk shouted as her forces prepared for another strike against the Calthor's stronghold. We hold them here, we win this war. The streets were alive with the sound of gunfire and explosions as humanity's fighters pressed forward, refusing to let the invaders take one more inch of Earth. Back in space, Admiral Carter's fleet continued to press its advantage. The Calthor flagship was weakening under the constant bombardment, and Carter knew they had only one shot to stop the superweapon before it could fire. We're at their core, Elara Voss said as her team worked to hack into the Calthor's systems. I can disable the weapon, but I'll need 10 more seconds. Keep them off our backs. Every ship in Carter's fleet fought with everything they had to keep the Calthor at bay. The Seraphim was at the heart of the chaos, its weapons firing relentlessly. The Calthor flagship was now surrounded on all sides by humanity's forces, the alien fleet in disarray as it scrambled to protect its final weapon. On the ground, General Hawk's forces were in the midst of their own battle. But Hawk's eyes remained focused on the skies. The fate of Earth, and humanity, was in the hands of Carter's fleet. 8 seconds, Elara's voice echoed over the comms. Hold them off, Admiral. The tension in the air was unbearable. The fate of both Earth and the human race rested on this single moment. 5 seconds, Elara counted down. Almost there. Finally, the moment arrived. The Seraphim fired its final shot. It was a blast so powerful that it seemed to tear through the very fabric of space itself. The Calthor flagship's core erupted in a violent explosion, the shockwave rippling through the remaining Calthor fleet. The superweapon never fired. The Calthor flagship, along with the alien forces surrounding Earth, was destroyed in an instant. As the dust settled in the void of space, a silence hung over the battlefield. For the first time since the invasion began, humanity could breathe again. The Calthor had been defeated. And Earth had not been erased. the void of space had fallen silent in the aftermath of the massive explosion. The Calthor flagship, once the pride of their fleet, was now little more than debris scattered across the blackness. The rest of their fleet, disoriented and leaderless, quickly lost cohesion, falling into chaos as humanity's forces pressed the attack with renewed vigor. The battle that had raged for so long seemed to be coming to an end. But despite their victory, the cost had been high. On Earth, the Resistance had taken the fight to the Calthor's ground forces, forcing them back with every available soldier, fighter, and resource they could muster. Cities that had once been symbols of humanity's triumph were now nothing more than skeletal remains, the streets pocked with craters and dust. Yet amid this devastation, humanity's resolve was unbroken. They had faced an impossible foe and survived. General Lena Hawke stood before a holographic map of the Earth, her eyes scanning the zone still controlled by the Calthor. She was tired, physically and emotionally drained, but the war wasn't over. Not yet. There were still pockets of the Calthor on Earth, and the final sweep to eradicate them had begun. "We'll need to hit their remaining strongholds with everything we've got," she said, her voice unwavering. "This is the final push." Commander Alara Voss, aboard the Seraphim, was overseeing the cleanup of the Calthor fleet. The Phoenix Corps, though strained from continuous use, had given humanity the edge they needed, and the Calthor were now scattered across space like leaves in the wind. The once great alien empire was on the verge of collapse. "Admiral, the Calthor are retreating," Voss reported, her voice crackling over the comms. "What remains of their fleet is trying to flee, but they're too disorganized to form any real resistance. We can end this now." Carter stood at the helm of the Seraphim, the weight of the battle evident in his posture. His fleet had sustained massive damage, and many of his crew had given their lives to get to this point. The space around them was littered with the remains of Calthor ships, and though victory was within grasp, Carter knew the war would leave a permanent scar on humanity. "We'll follow them to the ends of the galaxy if we have to," Carter replied, his voice full of resolve. "We'll make sure they never come back." But the war was not just a battle between two species. It was a struggle for the soul of Earth, a fight to preserve everything humanity held dear. And now, with the Calthor in retreat, humanity was beginning to face an even greater challenge: rebuilding. Back on Earth, General Hawke's forces had retaken key cities, but the damage was evident everywhere. As the Resistance fighters pushed forward, their victory was tempered by the realization that it would take generations to rebuild what had been lost. Earth's ecosystem had been ravaged by the Calthor's presence, entire swaths of the population were gone, and the infrastructure that had once sustained humanity was in ruins. Yet, there was a spark of hope. In a once vibrant city now reduced to rubble, Hawke stood before a group of civilians who had survived the worst of the occupation. They had witnessed humanity's darkest hour and had fought side by side with the Resistance. Now, as the war against the Calthor drew to a close, they were ready to take the first steps toward rebuilding their shattered world. "We're not just survivors," Hawke said, addressing the crowd. "We are humanity. We are the fire that can never be extinguished. And together, we will rise from the ashes." The civilians cheered, their spirits lifted by the strength of Hawke's words. The resilience of humanity was the very thing that had led them to victory, and it was what would carry them forward into an uncertain future. As Earth began its recovery, the Seraphim and its fleet continued their pursuit of the Calthor. The remaining invaders were cornered in a distant quadrant of the galaxy, their ships scattered and broken. They had no leaders, no hope of victory, only the inevitability of their destruction. And so, the final assault began. In the depths of space, Carter's fleet closed in on the Calthor remnants. With their command structure shattered, the Calthor were no longer a cohesive force. It was only a matter of time before humanity would extinguish their presence in the galaxy for good. "We have them," Carter said as the Seraphim locked onto the Calthor's last remaining ships. "For Earth. For every one of us." And with that, the final phase of the war began. The Calthor were annihilated in a series of swift, decisive strikes. Their remaining ships, small, disorganized, and ill-equipped, stood no chance against the might of humanity's forces. The once feared alien empire was gone. The war was over. Humanity had stood at the brink of extinction and fought back, not with superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but with an unyielding spirit. They had driven the Calthor from their world and their galaxy, pushing them into the dark void where they could never return. It was a victory that would echo through the ages, a testament to the resilience and tenacity of the human race. As the Seraphim and its fleet returned to Earth, Carter stood at the bridge, gazing at the planet below. It was scarred, yes, but it was still home. And for the first time in what seemed like forever, there was peace. "We did it," Elara Voss said, her voice soft but filled with emotion. "Not just for us," Carter replied, "but for all the generations to come." On Earth, General Hawk stood at the edge of a destroyed city, looking out over the horizon. It was a new dawn, one that promised both challenges and possibilities. The road to rebuilding would be long, but humanity had earned the right to walk it. "We are not finished yet," Hawk said, her voice carrying across the ruins. "The fight for our future is just beginning." The galaxy had been forever changed by the war. The Calthor, once a dominant force, had been wiped out, their empire reduced to nothing but memories scattered across the stars. Earth, scarred and battered by the invaders, was beginning the long and difficult process of healing. But while the fight had been won, the cost was not easily forgotten. The true battle now lay in rebuilding a fractured world and ensuring that humanity's future would be one of hope, not of endless warfare. On Earth, General Lena Hawk stood before a vast assembly of leaders, representatives from the remaining nations, and survivors of the war. The air was thick with uncertainty, but there was a shared resolve that they would rebuild not just their cities, but the very fabric of their society. The world had been united in defense of Earth, and now, it would unite in the task of reconstruction. "We've faced the darkness together," Hawk began, her voice steady. "We've proven that no matter the odds, humanity will always fight back. But our work isn't over. The future we build must be one of peace, cooperation, and progress. We cannot let this war define us. We must rise from the ashes and create a new world, a better world, for our children and for all the generations to come." The assembly erupted in applause, not just for the words, but for the promise of a future that had once seemed so distant. The rebuilding would take time, but humanity's unity was its greatest strength. As Earth's leaders worked to restore what had been lost, Admiral Lucas Carter stood at the helm of the Seraphim, now docked at Earth's new space station, an emblem of humanity's renewed strength in the stars. The Seraphim had survived the war, and it had become a symbol of the spirit that had carried humanity through the darkest of times. Carter knew that the road ahead would be long, but the victory they had secured meant that Earth was no longer a vulnerable planet. Humanity had proven that they could defend themselves, that they could hold their ground. Commander Elara Voss stood beside him, a thoughtful expression on her face as she gazed out at the planet below. "The Calthor are gone," she said. "But we've learned something important. We've learned that we can stand against anyone, no matter how powerful they are." Carter nodded. "We've learned that we are stronger together than we could ever be apart. The galaxy will remember us as the species that stood firm when all seemed lost." A message came through from Earth's new council, a collective body formed from the remnants of the old governments. It was a request to send representatives to negotiate peace and rebuild alliances with the races that had watched the war unfold. Earth had made its mark on the galactic stage. "We'll need to be careful," Elara warned, her tone serious. "Our victory over the Calthor doesn't mean that other species will welcome us with open arms. Some might fear us now. They'll learn to respect us," Carter replied, his voice filled with determination. "But we'll also show them that we're not conquerors. We're survivors. And we want peace." Meanwhile, humanity's first true steps into interstellar diplomacy began. The remnants of the Calthor fleet had been scattered across the galaxy, and in the wake of their downfall, some of the conquered species they had once subjugated sought refuge with Earth. These were races that had watched humanity's struggle and were now ready to join forces, to be a part of the new era humanity was creating. In one such meeting, General Hawk addressed the leaders of these alien species, races once at war with the Calthor, but now seeking a future where they could coexist with humanity. The Calthar wanted to divide us, she said. But we've proven that unity is stronger than tyranny. Together, we will ensure that no one will ever be oppressed again. The alien leaders, many of them scarred by their own histories of conquest and destruction, nodded in agreement. They had witnessed the courage of humanity, and now they saw in Earth a new hope, an example of what could be achieved when species worked together. The galaxy, once divided by conflict and distrust, now saw the potential for a new order, one built on cooperation rather than domination. As the galaxy began to shift, Earth became a hub of innovation and diplomacy. Humanity had become a beacon of hope in a universe that had once been ruled by fear. The Seraphim, now fully repaired and refitted, continued to patrol Earth's borders, ensuring that any remnants of the Calthar were eradicated. But it also ventured out into the stars, exploring new worlds and seeking new alliances. Humanity's reach had expanded beyond the confines of their planet, and now, they were part of something greater, something that had once seemed impossible. Admiral Carter, Commander Voss, and General Hawk, along with the rest of Earth's leadership, would play key roles in this new galactic age. They knew the journey ahead would not be without its challenges. But after everything they had faced, the invasion, the war, the sacrifices, they understood one thing above all: humanity was capable of anything. Years passed, and Earth began to flourish once again. The scars of the war remained, but they were no longer wounds. They were symbols of the resilience, the strength, and the indomitable will that had carried humanity through their darkest hour. And as humanity looked to the stars, they knew that they were no longer a species that cowered in the shadow of other powers. They had fought for their place in the universe, and they had earned it. The galaxy was vast, filled with mysteries and dangers. But humanity, with all its flaws and triumphs, had proven that it was a force to be reckoned with. And as the sun rose over a new Earth, one that had survived the horrors of war, there was no doubt left in anyone's mind. Humanity had won, not just the war, but the right to shape its own destiny. The last stand of mankind had ended, but the story of humanity was just beginning.